Hi friends, Tracy here from the Sewing Channel. Have you ever finished a quilt and been like, this would look so cute with scallops on it. But then you go to try to do it, right? And you're like, oh my. In the market today, there are several templates that are out there that are acrylic. The only drawback is you still have to make the paper template because the goal is to evenly space all of the scallops along your side of your quilt. Now, the tops and the sides of quilts, they're different across the board, from one quilter to the next quilter, from quilt to quilt. Now, I'm not trying to bash other people who have templates and rulers out there, but here's a pop-up of what they cost today. Keeping in mind, you still have to use paper with these templates. Friends, I have been working on this template for over a month now, and I finally got it. Now, I'm bringing it to you. No worries, I'm going to show you in the video how to use the template and all those things, and even how to bind your scallop quilt. I don't like math. I don't like mathing when it comes to quilting. My brain explodes when I start putting numbers together and dividing and, oh yeah, it's this length, and oh yeah, it's this length. Friends, that's not for me. And I know a lot of you out there are visual quilters just like me. That's who I designed this template for. People who just can't math. I've designed a scallop that goes into a color code extender. So no matter where you're at in your quilt process from corner to corner, you are able to open those color extenders from closed to just a little bit to a little bit more, or all the way, depending on your length of your quilt. For my friends out there who do not have a printer, I'm going to pop up here on the screen a list of places that you can go to get these templates copied for you. Or you can always, ask a friend, right? Tell them you'll buy them a set of templates if you let them use your printer. And it will keep your scallops absolutely perfect every time. So perfect, friends, that I even surprised myself. Enough talking already. Let's go. There are two ways to use my color-coded scallop extenders when it comes to quilting. First, if you have a quilt that is already done and it has been squared up fully, you then only need to print out two corners and then a bunch of the scallops that go in between there. Here's an example of me working on one side of one of my quilts that have been squared up already. And I'm just showing you here how to interlock and use the color-coded template extenders. You just weave the tab through. The directions are on the templates themselves, so you can't get it mixed up. No worries. When you open it all the way to the green code, you can then fold over the tip of that tab there, and that will help as a stopper so that your templates don't come apart. And you can also use it to help you slide back and forth to the color needed for the size quilt you have. You first lay out two corners opposite each other, then fill in all the gaps with the scallops themselves. Link them up all together just like you see how I've done here. You first start with all of the templates in the closed position so that you see no color, just like the top picture there. Depending on how big or small your quilt is, depends on how many scallops you end up using in between the corners. You may need to end up taking one of the scallops out when you start opening the color code. The goal here, get from corner of quilt to the other corner of quilt in an even manner on all of your templates. So if you open it to the yellow, make sure that all of the templates are open to the yellow around your entire quilt. That will ensure, my friends, that you have an evenly scalloped quilt, evenly spaced all the way around. Trust me. Once you have all of your scallops placed on your quilt, you've clipped them, everything is spaced out evenly, you're then going to take your marking tool and trace. Now, don't do what I did here. I traced and then I cut and then I traced a little bit more. You want to trace the entire side first and then go in with a sharp pair of scissors, not a rotary cutter, and you're going to trim on the line that you just marked all along that quilt side. One tip I can give you here is make sure that you have a nice fine pointed marking tool, which my pen was not. I ended up using a black fine-tipped marker on my first ears mouse quilt, so just keep that in mind. I just can't get over how beautiful that these scallops turn out every single time. One of the major perks of having your quilt already squared up and ready to go is this right here. When you get one side of all of the scallops done on your quilt from corner to corner, then all you have to do is flip that side over to the opposite side, right up to the edge of where it's squared off, and line up all of your hills of your scallops to the edge, the raw edge of the other side of the quilt. Then take your marking pen and just trace out the scallops just like you did before. And then you're going to grab your sharp scissors again. Scissors, not rotary cutter. Remember, you just have more control with a pair of scissors than you do a rotary cutter. So you're just going to go through and just follow the line and cut right on your mark all the way around that whole other side of the quilt. You definitely want to take your time when cutting these scallops out. I'm cutting upside down, just so you know, just to get the shot for you guys, but yeah, you want to cut properly. And just like magic, you have even Steven scallops on both sides. Whenever binding anything with curves, you always want to make sure that you definitely cut on the bias. And here I'm just simply showing you how I cut on the bias. You line up your ruler on the selvage and then you trim what you need widthwise. Now I did have to fussy cut my polka dots in order to get them in the right placement for my end result. So just keep that in mind if you need to do that as well. Okay, now on to the unsquared quilt, which is the camp that most of us are going to be in, right, when we use these templates. Once your templates are all laid out around your quilt, like you see on the left there, and they're all closed, something miraculous happens when you do start to open them. In the picture on the right, you can see that I've fully expanded the templates on my mock-up gray quilt here. As long as you lay out all of your templates edge to edge and everything is clipped and straight, the true squareness of your quilt actually emerges. In other words, as long as you have everything straight and you see a bunch on one side sticking out, it probably wasn't square to begin with. So your scallops are going to actually help you with this. Let's take a look at my first mouse ears quilt. I have all of the templates spaced nice and evenly all the way around. The same amount of color is showing on every single extender. As a side note here, I did have to cut off some of my batting and backing in order to get my clip onto my template and my quilt top. Take note of the color extenders and where they are open to. They are open like that throughout the entire quilt on all four sides. Just like earlier in this video, I shared with you how I traced the scallops. Well, that's the same thing you're going to do when you place the scallops around your entire quilt. Now you can just take your sharp pair of scissors and just follow that line that you marked around the entire quilt, trimming in and out all of the hills and valleys of your beautifully done scallops. You can also see here that I did lift up my first mouse ears quilt up onto my table so I could cut these scallops, because I was on the floor earlier cutting upside down and I wasn't about to do that on this one. True perfection, friends. Here's a shot of the back of this quilt without having any binding at all on it. I just want you to take note of the symmetry of all of the scallops. I mean, they were spot on in every single spot. It was amazing to me, and I'm the one who designed it, right? I'm using a type of single fold binding for my bias binding. All of the measurements are also in the pattern, and I don't fold it 1/4 inch too. You'll probably be surprised at what I do fold it to. I'll entertain any of your guesses on how much I do fold that over and give that a memory crease. Let me know in the comments, and I will tell you the answer if you get it right. One major tip that I'm going to give you right now is to never tug and pull at your bias binding. You can see here that I'm very lightly messing with the binding at all. I'm just kind of pushing it, smushing it, so to speak, toward the edge of the quilt. And then I'm just clipping it right in place. Even on the valleys, you just want to go nice and slow and clip it and don't pull at all. Then you're simply going to just take it to your sewing machine and use your regular old 1/4 inch seam allowance to stitch the non-folded edge to the back of your quilt that has all those beautiful scallops on it. Whenever you are, sewing anything that has a curve, especially like attaching your bias binding onto a scallop, having tweezers handy in your hand, literally, while you're sewing it is a must. You can see here, it's literally like having needle nose fingers. It's so much easier to grab and manipulate that edge of fabric onto the valley of the scallop, if you will, and then onto the hill, because you're kind of fanning it out when you get to the hill. But again, you're not pulling, you're just laying it. And in the valley, you're kind of pushing that fabric, easing it almost toward your sewing foot instead of away. Now, when you get to the biggest curve in your quilt, which is going to be the corners, it's a really easy corner curve to accomplish that nice fitted sewing all the way around. You just have to kind of squish your fingers down into the fabric, smushing toward the corner though. I hope that makes sense. Just go ahead and take a look at the video here and you'll see what I'm talking about. And also, when you do curves like this, you are going to have to maneuver your quilt in and out. You just don't want to try and sew a straight line, so to speak, and make your quilt do what you want it to. No, no, no. You want to move those scallops and hills and valleys with the stitch. I hope that makes sense. You can see me fussing back and forth with my quilt top, and that's what I mean when I say that. You want to just sew with the curve. Like right here in the video, I'm doing a valley, right? And I can see my fabric is kind of puffing up a little bit there. So I'm going to maneuver and fix my quilt top. Grab that edge, bring it over to the edge of the quilt, and I'm going to guide it almost into that curve shape as I'm sewing it. And all the while, I'm literally pushing my edge of my binding toward my presser foot. I'm never pulling away from it, except though when I do go on the hill of the scallop, you can see I kind of pull it out and place it. This is how I ended this binding and joined both pieces at the end. At the beginning when I started stitching, I left a big tail long, I don't know, 10 inches or so hanging, and then I started sewing the binding onto the back of the quilt. From that stitch line, I measured up approximately 5 inches or so and eyeballed a straight cut right across. It's important to note though, before I made that straight cut, that I did lay that edge of the binding around that curved area to make sure that I had enough. That's very important before you cut. Now take that same piece that you just cut off and lay the one edge right along the raw edge of the quilt binding that's still connected to your quilt. Take your other tail and lay it right side down onto those two strips. Again, very important that you place the edge of that binding along the curve so you know that you're going to have enough and you're not going to be short or you're not going to be over. Once that other binding, the scrap piece, is horizontal in there, go ahead and right on the edge of where it is, make your mark, just like you see how I did here. Now take out that scrap piece and then cut along that line that you just marked. Next, you're going to fold up the gap or the gape in between those two binding tails and clip those nicely together. Lift that top tail over to the right, exposing the right side of the fabric, and then you're going to grab that bottom tail, and that's going to go right side down, and you're going to crisscross them into a square. Pin or clip both pieces together and mark a straight line corner to corner on that little squared off area. So a straight line right on that mark that you just made. Now it is a bit harder to check this to make sure that you got it right as opposed to if you were just doing a straight edge. I just kind of laid it down and put it around all the hills and valleys right in that small area that I still needed to tack down. And it looked like it was going to fit, so I just continued on. But if it looks like it's too big, unpick and redo that area. And by too big, I mean there's too much of a gape there to where the binding edge needs to go to the quilt edge. And once you have it, you're just going to finish sewing the rest of that binding down to the back of the quilt. And you can see here, I was spot on and I was so proud of myself. Next, you're going to just take that binding that you just sewed on and flip it over to the front of your quilt. Pre-creasing that single fold binding ahead of time was definitely a game changer when adding this scallop binding onto my scalloped edged quilt. Everything just seemed to tuck under so nicely. I mean, I thought, wow, this is going too well. I mean, is there like a hidden camera somewhere and all of a sudden, you know, my binding was going to be all whacked out? But no way, man. It totally tucked in there perfectly. I mean, if I was ever surprised at how something was going to turn out, it definitely has to be this, friends, definitely. A tip I want to give you here is when you flip that binding over, make sure that you are filling in all of the binding area with the raw edge of your quilt. There should be absolutely no spaces within your quilt binding. On the edge there, you should not be able to pinch any air, so to speak. The entire binding area should be filled totally. So here's where I had my dilemma. Do I go ahead and machine, tack, and sew all of this binding to the front of this quilt? Or do I grab my needle and thread and hand sew, hand tack all of that beautiful scallop binding on my quilt? I wasn't sure. That's why you see me here in the video. I'm kind of just fidgeting around with it, and I'm literally thinking in my head, what do I do with this quilt? Machine quilting is definitely much quicker, and I could have gotten this done lickety-split, I'm sure of it. Just, you know, sew a stitch right along that folded edge of the binding and tack it right down to the front of my quilt. In the end, I decided to grab my needle and thread, and I did hand sew that binding down to the front. Let's check out this finished quilt together. Now friends, I have searched this quilt over on all the angles and I cannot find one scallop that is misaligned or out of place. Totally created this visual color-coded extender scallop template just for us visual quilters. This is truly the best no math scalloped ruler out there, friends. And you know I don't lie. The reason why I showed you the back of the quilt first at the beginning of the video is because I didn't want you to get distracted with what was on the other side of this quilt. So let's take a look at it. I know, it's super cute, right? These scallop templates totally gave me a reason to finish this quilt top. Yes, this design wall is sticking up this entire quilt, and it also sticks up quilts that are even bigger than this. The video for my design wall, it's on my channel. Also on my channel, a free tutorial for this quilt and also a free PDF, my first mouse ears quilt pattern. I will link all this in the description box below. What are you waiting for, friends? Go get that 10-page download so you can be putting some pretty scallops on your quilt. Until next time on the Sewing Channel, take care.